What's going on, guys? Need to find, here we go. Ava. There we go. Now, how do I bring you in, my friend here? Hey, everyone. Andrea Kennedy. Let me see here. Okay. There we go. I'm getting it.
I think I did it.
Hey, we're masters at this now.
Almost. I got a little confused, a little flustered, but here's my excuse.
Okay.
And it is totally aligned with what we're about to talk about. 54 years old right now, and I am hormonal at the moment.
Oh.
So my brain I'm experiencing hormone. I'm hormonally challenged.
All right. So I guess it's safer to do our conversations this way then.
Yeah, you better believe it. Just don't say the wrong thing, David.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, well, I mean, males have the opposite. I mean, males have the thing, called andropause, but it's still the issues of low testosterone, low libido, depression. It's pretty interesting. I over the weekend I was at a conference in Vancouver, and a couple times I had to remind people that if 50 million people say or do a stupid thing, it's still stupid.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's such an important consideration when we look at in mass. We just see so much of society just not coping well, not doing well, but it's just this. It's almost it seems like a lemming thing, like if I look around and all the things that are wrong are prevalent, and they're so prevalent they seem normal, but they're not normal, they're just prevalent.
Right.
So you look around and go, well, I'm not so different, and my problems aren't so different, and my challenges are not so different.
Okay.
So we don't look for a strategy outside of that because it's normal, and even you'll get quite often people will come back with some frustration saying, I went to see my GP and he said, well, considering your time of life, considering your age.
That's right.
And when I read statistics, the statistics are based on the average. But what if I don't want to be average, especially in midlife?
There you go. That's right. Yeah. And so you in a very fancy way, you described complacency, right?
Yeah.
Where people become complacent to, well, I'm just like everybody else my age. And then we learn just what you're talking about, that the bar is so low, even in the medical profession, when you're not in the world of anti-aging, at least, that, and I work with men largely, most of my clients are men actually. And when they come to me, they have all the symptoms you just described. They're depressed. They're often on antidepressants. And it's a shame because the first thing I say to people is, have you had your testosterone tested? Because the symptoms emulate depression. And of course, and us ladies know that we can become purely psychotic. We can, believe certain things to be true. And the next day we realize, what did we just say? I've learned to keep my mouth shut. I said that to you earlier. Because I talk to myself and say, really, you're thinking that right now? You've got to be kidding. But you guys, you're not used to it. You're not used to bringing this to the forefront. And this andropause thing is something that needs to be discussed more, because a lot of guys, midlife crisis is often fueled by this low T all of a sudden, and guys are trying to get that mojo back for all of life, and they go about it the wrong way, or the least effective way, let's just say. Right?
Well, it's so I mean, but I think one of the challenges that it's just, I know that in my journey over the last 25 years trying to pull stuff apart, it's there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and I think, you know, with there's so much conflicting information out there, which really is confusing, especially if you're just the average consumer of data, and you're going, okay, just every time Dr. Oz comes up with 900 different strategies over the course of the month, and you know, like, you know, my supplement bill is going to be $9,000, right? Because I got to take this, I got to take that, I got to take this, and but I shouldn't take that, but that conflicts with that. And if I'm an indigenous person, I can't use that. And I'm from, you know, from Sweden, then I should use that. If I got blue eye, like it's, so how do you wade through all this? I mean, I don't know how I wade through it, but like you work with so many people, and how do you, what's the hierarchy for people, especially people around midlife? What's the hierarchy of kind of needs that you walk them through to kind of simplify this whole confusing conversation?
Well, first of all, we're so lucky because we are catching up to what modern medicine has to offer in terms of the accessibility of it. It used to be so cost prohibitive to address these issues. And then, you know, anyway, but let's just back up a minute, because one of the things that people don't realize is that midlife really starts at 40 and goes to 70 by definition at this point.
Right. Okay.
So 40 years old, men in particular, now women, look, you know, I want to focus on men just for a minute, which, because you guys don't talk about this stuff a lot. Right. But right after about 40 years old, testosterone levels start to dip pretty significantly. And as you mentioned earlier, doctors consider this range around like 400 to be normal and healthy for a guy in his mid 40s. Well, let me assure you, I've been told, I'm not a man, I've been told you guys feel like crap when you're in that range. So prior to having that, you know, if you're not ready for medical intervention, and there's a lot, I'm not promoting medical intervention, frankly, because you have to know your body, you have to know your medical history, you have to have a trusted doctor, all of those things. I'm not a medical person in that way, but there are simple ways to naturally supplement and to eat and to exercise to engage, you know, hormone production and to, you know, just kind of support your aging process, right? So, you know, DHEA and DIM and, you know, there's all kinds of fancy things out there, you know, that are over the counter. I have a couple things that I like for me, but I also think the stigma that is associated with taking testosterone for guys is something that it's at this point it's a myth. Right. You know, because you're not talking about guys who are going out to use testosterone so that they become like on the cover of the magazines, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the level of hormone balancing that keeps you feeling vibrant and sexy and smart and all those areas that our hormones have such a huge role in. Right.
Well, I know when a few years back, I went to New York and did some genetic testing, and they took enough blood that I almost needed a transfusion when they were done. But it's and even for some, you know, even for myself, who I mean, I run a pretty healthy, pretty tight ship as far as it comes to health and supplementation. I carry lots of physical mass, and my testosterone levels were really low. Just in comparison, so they're genetically for me. For my particular genetic profile, my T levels are way lower than what they were supposed to be. Thyroid levels were really low. Estrogen levels, of course, would be on a little bit too high. Vitamin D levels were way too low. Like there's a bunch of things specifically for me that genetic testing really actually kind of something that my doctors here locally would never ever look at. They would, you know, even if I paid for it, and I'd always get the brush off. Well, you're an athlete, and you're this, you're that. You're fine. You know, you just work too hard, and they just sweep it under the rug. It's very frustrating not to get, not to even have them engage in the conversation where I work so hard on my health, and they won't even come halfway, and I'm going more than halfway in my efforts.
Yeah, and you know, certainly there's things that people are doing in midlife that promote the decline of hormone wellness, right? And so you talked about vitamin D. Well, that's a supplement, a natural vitamin that you can add to your diet. But how about when people wind up consuming more alcohol than they need to, and they slow down their exercise, and they start eating in ways that put on, weight, that change their body functioning and their metabolism, so that all that stuff that people do that they can change so easily to help support the aging process.
Well, I think, like Ava, I think one of the things that people don't consider, we don't have to think about, is that we think about our fat tissue as this inert substance, where it's just fat. It's it's either it's for padding our organs. We're just storing extra fuel, like a Saint Bernard with a big cast around his neck. We're just packing some extra stuff with us. But fat tissue is actually really active, really hormonally active, and really impedes our hormonal levels. And I don't think people realize that. They think fat tissue is just fat. It's not really doing anything at all, but it's really impactful.
Yeah. So, one of the things that you and I both know about is the art of bodybuilding. And I always say that, putting on our muscle the way we've done, and the way I talk with people, and I don't train people, you train people physically. That's not my area. But obviously I know what I'm doing around the gym. I can make my way around. And so I do give some pointers and such. And one of the greatest anti-aging elements of fitness is actually creating muscle and strength, so we can support our bones, so we can lift our babies that are, our grandbabies, and you have grandbabies. You do. Right? And so often I find that particularly women move away from the weight training and do an excessive amount of cardio because they're trying to fight the fat gain that, tends to happen as we hit midlife and our hormones change. We put on fat, as you're talking about, more readily. And so they're like dying to get out there and be the cardio bunny. And what they're really doing is diminishing. You can speak more about this. This is your area, but if they were building muscle, they'd be supporting their bodies in ways that can help them live longer and stronger. True, David, or not?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and the thing about excessive running, I mean, when I was doing was more involved in rehabilitative work, I spent more time fixing runners than anybody of any athletic, because it's such a linear activity, and it can be highly inflammatory. I mean, that really can create a lot of problems with the body. And but yeah, you're right. I mean, strength training, especially, nowadays we have this huge focus on HIIT training, right? Everything is HIIT. Even yoga, which is supposed to be kind of a passive behavior, is now HIIT yoga, right? Like we've kind of taken a course. As North Americans, we always take it to the far extreme.
Wait, I've not even heard about this HIIT yoga thing. Are you kidding me? That seems like it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, well, but that's the North American way, right? We just like to, we like to take a passive idea. It's really good. It's actually really good for us, and just jack it up about 9 levels because everybody's so amped up. They just want, they need the stressor exercise, right? But the thing with strength training, but the one benefit of HIIT training, and this only works if you recover properly, is that HIIT training actually creates enough stress in the body, enough physical stress in the body where it stresses the immune system, right? It stresses our hormonal system and actually forces the body to actually come back aggressively to repair, right? So you generally, but it's the repair process that people are missing, right? People are missing the recovery process. So people love training hard, and people that do train don't mind training hard. They love the feeling of just hitting it, right? They're in fight or flight anyhow, so just killing a great workout actually just fits naturally into that hormonal sequence, right? It just feels good because kind of what your body wants you to do, right? Either kill it or run away from it or turtle, right? So hitting it feels really good. But it's and of course you have these huge hormonal spikes and this big stress on the immune system. But it's only really beneficial if you actually have really great nutritional strategies on the other side of it, like, you know, low amount of alcohol consumption, good sleep patterns, right? Good control of stress. But people think exercise is good for you, but exercise is actually just a form of stress. It's only good for you if you recover.
Right, right, right. You know what? And you bring up a really important and tricky part of that whole process, which is the sleep component, because what happens as people get older, we tend to sleep less, unless we develop really healthy sleep patterns, because in our sleep is when our hormones are rejuvenating, you know, and producing, correct?
Right. Well, and I mean, it's everything is actually happening when we sleep. And I found it took me, when I went through my genetic testing, I found that my cortisol levels were just off the chart. So I find it really hard to sleep at night because but hard to get up in the morning, because my cortisol levels, which should rise in the morning to wake me up to get me ready for the day, were actually very low, but they're blunted. And then at night, when I'm trying to get to bed, my cortisol levels start to rise.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, you know, I think, you know, if I was going to target anything, if I had diet and exercise and sleep and those three things I had to focus on, I would actually work on sleep strategies first before I did anything.
So I actually do I call it sleep hygiene with my clients. And that is not about keeping it clean in bed, boys and girls. Not at all. But sleep hygiene is just like, you know, we have hygiene, we have oral hygiene, and we brush our teeth. Everybody brush their teeth, right? Hopefully more than once a day. But so sleep hygiene is developing a routine that does exactly what you needed, which is to train your brain to go into sleep state. It's so oftentimes I teach people an exercise called the peaceful place exercise. And really, you know, if we remember, we can be the master of our minds. I'm just going to throw this out to the audience so that they can have, you know, perhaps a little sleep tool in their back pocket. You know, very often people in midlife wind up saying, oh, I'll have the little nightcap, or which turns into a bottle. And then, you know, also I hear about, you know, people who stay on watching movies until they fall asleep, and even reading until you fall asleep is very, very different, a very different way of trying to go to sleep. It's actually, it doesn't clear your headspace the way you think it does. It just basically tires you into sleep state. So if you want to be the master of your mind and really go into a healthy sleep condition, you have to create that space. And sometimes it's only like a matter of 5 minutes. Some people like to give it a good half hour. And the peaceful place exercise, in a nutshell, is treating your brain like the computer system that it is, and using all of your senses, what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, smells like, and even tastes like, to recall the most peaceful place you've ever been.
Right.
And you bring up all of those sensory memories, close your eyes, and you find where in your body this resonates the most. And then you channel your energy into that spot, and you let it spread throughout your entire being. I'm giving to you know, I'm very happy if people want to reach out to me, I will give them a quick coaching on that little exercise that I just made very simple. You know, they can message me on Facebook, and it's not complicated. It's very corny. I'm accused of being corny all the time in my life, and I don't care anymore. But it absolutely works, because we become the masters of our minds and reduce that cortisol that you're talking about. And the thing is, David, you probably had an increased amount of cortisol as the day went on, because most of us don't create the pause in our day to do that kind of peaceful place exercise, or step back and somehow allow our brains to slow the cortisol production throughout the day. And so the buildup becomes monstrous. And midlife people, and I'm going on and on here because I'm looking at the time and I want to make sure I fit everything in. But when we're in midlife, we tend to also be in mid intensity with our careers and our family lives. And so if we don't take care of our brains that produce our hormones and all, you know, everything that where it all lives, then we're going to wind up having that burnout feeling.
Right.
And our bodies will respond.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's, you know, so, and for me, I mean, where I hit a wall hard around 45, you know, new business, children, right? Just all these things. And and even positive stressors still is a huge push to the body, right?
Yeah.
If there's no recovery. And I think, even good stress is still distress, right? It's still costing something because it takes you and it puts you in an elevated state. Even so it's, yeah. And I think it's challenging, especially for males, because males, generally are not given a platform. You don't want to come across as as a wimp, and you should be able to shoulder the burden, and you should be able to, and we don't generally have conversations. There's lots of tools out there, but not a lot of real, manly conversations around, I'm burned out. I just can't take this anymore. And I remember being on my stairs one night, it's like midnight and everybody's asleep. I get to be up at 5 a.m., be at work at 6. And I'm going, I can't do this another 20 days. I got to do this another freaking 20 years. You kidding me?
That's right.
And I go, holy shit! Like I'm doing everything right. Like I don't smoke. I drink occasionally. I eat healthy. I work hard. But the cost of my life was so high that I nutritionally I just couldn't support it.
Yeah.
There was no downtime. It was just full tilt all the time. A healthy life, right? But even a life that doesn't involve excessive drinking, doesn't involve smoking, it involves exercise, still can be a real stressful life.
That's right. And you know what? We just had a comment about somebody who said, no matter how much I'm busting my butt in the gym, I still have this weight and it's so depressing. And, one of the things that we also have to look at is that our bodies do respond differently to if we keep doing the same things we did when we were younger, we're not going to have the same result. We need to change it up, and we need to pay attention to how our body is responding. And if it's not working, we can then change it up, further. Have you worked with people to help them make shifts? What would be the most important shifts that you've seen happen in their training process to meet their physical stage of life?
Yeah, well, a lot of it's just, we look at what they're doing and we set it up. Like we actually set it up so that we turn it all into numbers. So we have the amount of time they're training, the amount of calories they're eating, right? The heart rate, where the heart rate sits. Because I think if we, my example is if you take a laborer and a tradesman and you drop them off at 6 a.m. on a job site, give them rubber boots and gloves. The tradesman goes in with a set of blueprints and he has an entire schematic of exactly what he needs to do with the materials, exactly where it goes, the timeline, a very specific set of instructions. The laborer goes in there with a pair of gloves and the rubber boots, and he's just got to move stuff around all day. So at the end of the day, they're both exhausted. They both worked really hard. The laborer, they're both sore in their muscles, but the tradesman actually built something. He actually created something. The laborer just went and moved a bunch of stuff around. And I think with an exercise, we think that, going in and investing the effort, non-specific effort, with a real end goal in mind, rather than, people say, I just want to be in shape. I said, well, round's a shape. Let's be more specific about what we're doing with our exercise. And you'll always notice that, and you'll know in a very short period of time. So if you set the criteria saying, I want to be able to measure my success over the next 30 days, and my goal is to see these things. And we need to be more intelligent rather than more emotional around the conversation, because we're comprised of billions of cells. Like it's not an easy thing, which is why most people get frustrated. And we talk about individuality, where it's some people, how I responded to training was so much different because I grew up on a farm. So I walked in the gym, it was like going home, right? My brain goes, yeah, this is my home, this is my place. Pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. But for somebody who grew up in the city, right, who never really, who maybe skateboarded a little bit, but never did that physical labor, their body goes in, I have no idea what this is. And the response isn't the same. So we take it personally, but it's really, I think, for people going in there, I think we need to look at, it's not just the gym. Working at the gym only causes stress. And maybe it's going back to the part you're talking about, Ava, we're talking about the sleep part. If we're busting our ass in the gym and we know the effort is on point, then that's not the variable. We need to look at sleep, recovery, nutrition.
Right.
Pick one of those variables.
Right.
And I think, and then just change one of them, not change all of them, but just one variable at a time and saying, well, let's just work on the nutritional piece. If I'm kind of sloppy with that, being sloppy to, what was the estimate? I think they said people underestimate their calories by anywhere from 80 to 200%.
Oh yeah, that would be me right there. On the other end of that. Lately.
That's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And
right. And so people don't always know even how to calculate that out. And you don't, from where I sit, you and I are very particular about our numbers, particularly around certain times of the year. And I would not want people personally to wind up so attached measuring that way. I'd rather people get an idea of what a portion size looks like.
Right.
And what it consists of, and pay attention to the ingredients and not so much the numbers. Right. It's interesting because I had this delightful woman who I was introduced to recently call me. She said, can I please talk to you about something that's happening in the gym? I need to talk to you. And she was so embarrassed. And I bet you she's not, far, far, far from the only one that has had this experience. So I gave her a lot of credit for sharing this with me. So she's a really fit, let me clarify. She's a very tiny, she's not fat. That's the point. She didn't have weight to lose, but she came from a place of her exercise consisted of using a yoga mat at home, which is fine, and anything she could do at home. She decided that she said, oh my, I'm starting to get a little loose in certain areas. I'm going to go to the gym. Well, before she went to the gym, though, she went and bought, and sorry to say this, I'm sure Suzanne Summers has done wonderfully with her product. I've never seen it before in my life, but she said, I bought the Suzanne Summers thigh blaster thing or whatever it is. And she said, and I did thousands of them and nothing was happening. Okay. So I decided to go to the gym, and there was this machine that looked like it was doing exactly what Suzanne Summers' machine was going to be doing for me. So I did 200 to 300 reps on that machine. And I did it for 4 days in a row. And now I have this bulging thing in my inner thigh. Could I have built muscle that quickly? And I said, honey, that's what we call an injury. That's inflammation. And no, you didn't. If you could build muscle that quickly doing that, and I explained to her that actually she's the complete opposite of building muscle. Complete opposite. And so this is a really smart woman, and I'm not making fun of her. She was laughing at herself. So I am making fun of her, but we were both laughing at her. She was laughing at herself too. And she's a really, really smart woman. So it has nothing to do with intelligence. And the point is that even really smart people are not as informed as they need to be about what exercise is, what exercise is best for reaching their goals. So I would really wish for people to, maybe you can provide, this is your expertise, but maybe it's somewhere you could just kind of list some good websites or articles or anything that can teach people, in midlife, how do we start to train if you've never trained before? Because there's a lot, we're not all gym rats. So for those people who are trying to get into a more fit condition because they're noticing that, my metabolism must be different and I'm not burning things the way I used to, and now I'm putting on some weight and I'm starting to see my granny arms show up and all those things that can happen. How do they get started safely and effectively?
Right. Well, I think when we're done this broadcast, actually, I'll pop some links in there, and I think but just in short, I mean, the flow for me is always the same. It's been the same conversation for years. But for a lot of people, that especially if they're more administrative, their lifestyle is more administrative, spend more time sitting on their butt as we are now. It's I don't encourage people to even go on extended walking programs. I had a client that had recovered from some issues with prostate cancer, and he has a back issues. He said, I'm just going to go walk. I said, well, walk. Yes, if you do, but just walk 20 minutes a day. But don't do any more. And I'm going to walk 45 minutes. And he wouldn't listen. He herniated 3 discs by walking 45 minutes a day. And he realized he was so weak in his whole core section that walking, that constant pounding and that repetitive pounding, the muscular imbalance, it put him out of the game. And it's just, so it's not, so I try to get people There's a client I'm working with now. She's a heavier lady. And I said, but I have her just lying in her bed. So before you get out of bed, here's 5 exercises you do just to turn some spinal muscles on, turn some of your hip muscles on before you do anything. There is a process, and people are just, you have to be patient. You really, I mean, it's the law of the farm. You have to be patient. Otherwise, it's just never going to happen the way you want.
Right. So, you know, I think that it's important to look at, you know, you and I come from an athletic standpoint, but we also come from this very, and I know we're at 30 minutes and I don't want to keep people, on from, but we really need to target the mindset that goes along with being your most powerful self in midlife, because it is such an amazing time of life. And, you know, for next time, I would just love to add this in the end here, but midlife, we are fortunate because we have all the decades before us to use as backdrop of information, right? We're so well informed that we can now, and I like to say, look, once I hit 50, once I rounded 50, I don't have to give a flying you-know-what about what anybody thinks. I've earned that right on the planet. But that said, I have learned how to learn. Right. And I have learned how to evaluate and develop a very clear sense of self and my future. And now it's time to actualize it. And that's the beauty of midlife creation. And turning that into the most prosperous emotionally, physically, financially. Right.
Well, and I think that's how we both kind of connected through LinkedIn. Is we talked about the language is slightly different, but the philosophy was exactly the same. It was so funny because I sent some material off to, we started going back and forth in conversation, and we both realized that it's just, like how I developed the physical part, how you develop the physical part, because the mind went there first. Right. The mind went there first. How you develop, the appropriate amount of body fat, the mind went there first. And I think one of the challenges that so many people have, if they find themselves struggling, is that and I did this with a client here that had spent 2 years, fighting through various types of therapy, where her history was constantly being thrown back at her, and they were digging up all the challenging parts of life. If you've been on the planet for a while, you've had some challenges for sure. But nobody had actually gone through and actually had dug up every beautiful thing that she ever accomplished. And so we spent about 40 minutes just pulling up all this. Well, you did this right. You didn't kill your kids, right? You managed to hold down a marriage. You're not a drug addict. Like you have all these incredible things. How can you not? And as you speak to using a backdrop, I think having somebody walk you through, because it's kind of hard to do it on your own, but having somebody to walk you through and actually pull back and just pull the weeds out, saying there's a few weeds here, but oh my God, look at this freaking beautiful garden that you've cultivated in the course of your life, and it's extraordinary. And all you're doing is staring there, looking at, but there's a freaking weed here. My life is just a weed. And as we pull these things back, and similar to what you talked about the sleep hygiene, we pull back, this is what you did. It's like look into a family album. If you've had a family album of all the amazing things of your life, I think we had realized that the tragedies in our lives, the things, and some of us lived some pretty horrific things. They may have actually taken up maybe 168 hours out of the decades we've been alive. Like maybe a week's worth of tragedies. If you add up when it started, how long it went on for, and when it completed, it really wasn't that much time.
Right.
And yet, but I'll take that and I'll broad sweep it over so I can't see the rest of my life, which was 10 times the amount of amazing things that were occurring. 10 times the times where I wasn't in trauma, I wasn't having bad things happen.
I say this all the time to my clients. Our history is to inform us, not define us. Right? Our history is meant to inform us and not define us. So we can be decision makers in the moment right now. how would we like to define ourselves, and how do we use our history to inform us on how we would like to define ourselves. But we don't have to be trapped by labels from 20 years ago. Or experiences from 20 years ago. And you know what? I know we're running really long. Can we talk about this next week?
Absolutely. Well, it's and again, like you said, that was one of the connecting pieces for, you know, I mean, we're both athletes, but it wasn't the athletic conversation. It was this minds piece that we both kind of found that so many of our thoughts parallel. But Eva, thank you so much. I know it's getting late for you as well, but I think, you know, I think the important part of this is that, an important takeaway for me is that we just got to find, we have to pick our battles and find pieces. I'm going to just work with this thing here, and give it time. Work with the sleep hygiene for the next 30 days, and allow yourself to develop a little bit of skill and practice, but just be graceful in the process. Give yourself some time to figure it out, and reach out, and, as you know, reach out for help. You know, we're doing this because we care, and we see the frustration. We see people kind of hiding in their lives, not knowing how to see the forest for the trees, or see the trees for the forest, as it were. And we do these things because we just want the information out there. We want people to start thinking and realizing it's not that hard, but sometimes you have to ask for a little bit of help.
That's right.
All right.
That's great.
Okay. All right. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you as always.
See you. Thanks, everybody. See you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.